It was a cold autumn evening in a quiet suburban town in Ohio. The streets were still, save for the occasional hum of passing cars and the rustling of leaves in the breeze. Officer Michael was on patrol, his headlights cutting through the darkness, when something unusual caught his eye. A small figure standing alone on the sidewalk. He slowed the car and looked closer. It was a little girl, no older than 8, barefoot and shivering in the cold. Her hair was tangled, her clothes were tattered, and in her arms, she clutched a worn teddy bear, its fur so faded it was hard to tell what color it had once been. She seemed frozen in place, too scared to move, her eyes darting nervously down the empty street. Michael pulled over, stepping out of the car carefully, his movements slow and deliberate. The girl didn't run but flinched slightly when he approached. Her wide eyes, full of fear, looked up at him, and he could see the desperation in her expression. "Hey there," he said gently, crouching to her level so as not to seem intimidating. "Are you okay? Are you lost?" The girl didn't respond immediately. Her lips quivered, and she seemed to draw closer to the teddy bear as if it could protect her. Finally, in a voice so soft it was barely audible, she whispered, "Help me." Those 2 words hit Michael like a punch to the gut. There was something in her tone, an urgency, a vulnerability, that went beyond the surface. He reached for his radio without hesitation, speaking quickly but calmly. "Dispatch, this is Officer Michael. I've got a young child here. She's alone, possibly abandoned. I need backup at West Maple and 3rd, over." He put the radio down and looked at her again. "You're safe now," he said softly, trying to reassure her. "Nobody's going to hurt you." The girl didn't say anything else, but she didn't move away either. She watched him warily as he stayed by her side. When backup arrived moments later, she tensed visibly, clutching her teddy bear even tighter. Michael knelt down again, keeping his tone as calm as possible. "It's okay," he said. "These are my friends. They're here to help." At the police station, the girl was wrapped in a warm blanket and given a seat in a quiet corner. Despite the bright lights and busy officers moving about, her gaze remained fixed on Michael. She seemed unwilling to let him out of her sight. A female officer, Sarah, knelt beside her, offering a gentle smile. "Hi, sweetheart. My name's Sarah. Can you tell us your name?" The girl shook her head and tightened her grip on the bear. Sarah didn't press further, but Michael stepped in. "It's okay," he said gently. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. We're here to help you, no matter what." The hours stretched on as the girl sat quietly in her corner, sipping from a cup of hot cocoa that Michael had brought her. Slowly, he began asking her simple questions about her teddy bear, her favorite color, anything to make her feel more at ease. At first, she only nodded or shook her head, but eventually she whispered, "My name is Lily." "That's a beautiful name," Michael said, smiling warmly. "Do you remember where you came from, Lily? Or how you got here?" Lily hesitated, her small hands clutching the mug tightly. Tears welled up in her eyes as she finally whispered, "A bad place. There were other kids there. They wouldn't let us leave." Michael's heart sank. He exchanged a glance with Sarah, whose expression mirrored his own concern. "You're very brave for telling us that, Lily," he said softly. "We're going to figure this out together." As Lily sat quietly, Michael and his team worked tirelessly to piece together the fragments of information she had shared. A red barn, the sound of trains at night, adults who hurt the children and made them afraid to speak. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start. When Michael returned to her side, he knelt down and looked her in the eye. "Lily, we're going to help those kids, just like we helped you. I promise." Lily looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and hope. "Will you be okay?" she asked in a small voice. Michael nodded firmly. "I promise we'll be careful. We're going to make sure everyone is safe." As the hours turned into early morning, the station was abuzz with activity. Officers reviewed maps, made calls, and coordinated their next steps. Lily sat quietly, clutching her teddy bear and watching everything unfold. For the first time in what felt like forever, she allowed herself to hope. Hope smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "And you gave me so much more than that. You gave me a life, a home, and a reason to believe in people again." Michael chuckled. "You gave me all of that too, kiddo. And you gave it to countless others." They sat in peaceful silence, the warmth of their bond enveloping them like the golden glow of the setting sun. Hope's story, woven with resilience, love, and unwavering faith in the power of kindness, was no longer just hers. It belonged to every child she had helped, every family she had touched, and every heart inspired by her journey. And as the first stars appeared in the evening sky, she knew that the legacy they had built together would continue to shine, lighting the way for generations to come. As Hope and Michael continued to live their lives surrounded by love, the seeds of their work spread further than they could have ever imagined. The foundation flourished, its mission carried on by passionate advocates who had been deeply inspired by Hope's journey. Its impact reached countless children across the globe, each life transformed by the power of care and compassion. Hope, though retired from the day-to-day operations, remained a guiding light. She frequently visited the Foundation's headquarters, offering words of wisdom and encouragement to the staff. Her presence was a reminder of why the work mattered, of the profound difference that even one act of kindness could make. One spring morning, Hope received a letter in the mail. The handwriting was small and neat, and the return address was unfamiliar. As she opened it, her heart skipped a beat. "Dear Hope," it began, "you don't know me, but your story saved my life. When I was a child, I was lost and scared, much like you once were. I remember watching a video of you speaking about how someone gave you hope when you needed it most. I held on to those words, and they gave me strength to believe my life could be different. Today, I'm happy to tell you I'm finishing my degree in social work so I can help children like us. Thank you for inspiring me to believe in a better future." The letter was signed simply, "With love and gratitude, Maria." Hope sat in silence for a moment, her fingers brushing the edges of the paper. Tears filled her eyes as she read the letter again, her heart swelling with a deep sense of fulfillment. She thought of the frightened little girl she had once been, clutching her teddy bear on a dark street, and how far she had come since then. Later that evening, as she sat on the porch with Michael, she handed him the letter. He read it carefully, his eyes softening with pride. "You see," he said, handing it back to her. "Your story isn't just yours. It's theirs now, too. You've given people something to hold on to." Hope nodded, her smile radiant. "It's incredible, isn't it? How one small act of kindness can ripple out and change so many lives." Michael leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "You're proof of that, Hope. And so is everyone you've touched." In the years that followed, Hope and Michael continued to cherish the simple joys of life. Quiet evenings at home, long walks with Bella, and visits from friends and family. Their home became a place of celebration and reflection, a sanctuary where laughter and love flourished. On Hope's 50th birthday, the Foundation held a special event in her honor. People from all over the world gathered to celebrate her life and legacy, sharing stories of how her work had impacted them. As Hope stood on stage, looking out at the crowd, she felt overwhelmed by the enormity of what they had built together. Michael stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a constant source of strength and love. "None of this would have been possible without the people who believed in me," Hope said, her voice steady and filled with gratitude. "To my dad, Michael, you were my first act of hope, and you've been my anchor ever since. To everyone here, thank you for carrying this mission forward. Together, we've proven that love can truly change the world." The applause was deafening, but it was the smiles on their faces that truly moved her. Each one was a testament to the power of resilience, the strength of community, and the enduring impact of kindness. As the evening wound down and the stars began to fill the sky, Hope and Michael sat quietly on a bench, watching the world around them. Hope reached for his hand, her fingers wrapping around his. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked softly. Michael turned to her, his expression calm and certain. We've done more than enough, Hope. And the best part? It's still growing. What we started will keep going long after we're gone. Hope smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. Then I think we can rest easy. Michael chuckled, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. I think we already have. And as they sat together under the vast night sky, surrounded by the love they had nurtured and the legacy they had built, they knew their story would live on, woven into the hearts of those they had touched and carried forward by the light of hope. When the police finally prepared to leave for the raid, Michael came to say goodbye. He knelt down once more, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. I'll be back soon, he said, his voice steady. And when I come back, we'll have your friends with us. Lily nodded, her grip on the teddy bear tightening as she watched him walk out the door. Her heart raced with fear and hope as the flashing lights of the police cars disappeared into the night. She prayed silently that Michael and the other officers would return safely, and that the other children would be free. The hours stretched endlessly as Lily waited in the quiet station. She sat in the corner of the room, her teddy bear pressed tightly against her chest. Every now and then, she glanced at the door, willing it to open and reveal Michael with good news. Her small body trembled with a mix of fear and anticipation, her mind replaying flashes of the dark place she had escaped. A kind female officer stayed near, trying to distract her with soft words and gentle smiles. She brought Lily a coloring book and crayons, but Lily's hands were too shaky to draw. She thanked the officer with a timid nod, but kept her gaze fixed on the door. She couldn't focus on anything but the uncertainty of what was happening. The minutes dragged on, turning into hours. Occasionally, voices outside the room would grow louder, words like operation and rescue filtering through the cracks in the door. Lily didn't understand everything, but those words made her heart race. She knew Michael was out there, risking himself for her and the others. She hugged the bear tighter and closed her eyes, whispering a silent prayer for him to be safe. Suddenly, there was a commotion outside. Lily's eyes shot open, her breath catching in her throat. The door swung open, and there he was, Michael. His uniform was rumpled and he looked exhausted, but his face lit up with a smile as soon as he saw her. We found them, he said softly as he knelt down in front of her. Your friends are safe now. Everyone is safe. Relief washed over Lily in waves. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded slowly, unable to speak. Michael reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. You did this, Lily, he said, his voice full of pride. You were brave, and because of you, we were able to help them. Lily looked up at him, her lip trembling. Are they okay? She whispered. Michael smiled gently. They're scared, but they're okay. Just like you. They're going to be safe now. As he spoke, other officers began escorting the rescued children into the station. Lily's breath hitched as she recognized familiar faces. A little boy clung to a female officer's hand, his eyes wide with fear. Without thinking, Lily stood and crossed the room. She knelt in front of him, holding out her teddy bear. Here, she said softly. You can hold him. He'll keep you safe. The boy hesitated, then took the bear with trembling hands. His face softened and he hugged the toy tightly. Michael watched the exchange, his throat tightening with emotion. The room filled with the sound of officers comforting the children, offering blankets, food, and gentle words. Community volunteers arrived with supplies, warm clothes, toys, and snacks. The station, once a place of strict order, now buzzed with kindness and care. Michael knelt beside Lily again. You've got a big heart, you know that? He said with a smile. You're helping everyone feel safe. Lily gave him a small smile. For the first time in a long while, she felt more than just fear. She felt something warm and unfamiliar. Hope. As the night wore on, Michael stayed close to Lily, making sure she was okay. He brought her another cup of hot cocoa and sat with her as she sipped it slowly. Every so often, he would tell her a funny story or share a small joke, his presence steady and calming. Lily began to relax, even managing a quiet laugh when Michael made a silly face. Later, as the station quieted and the rescued children were cared for, Michael turned to Lily. "Lily," he said softly, "I've been thinking about something." She looked up at him, her eyes wide with curiosity. "I was wondering—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Would you like to stay with me? Not just for a little while, but for good. What do you think about that?" Lily blinked, her small hands gripping the edge of the blanket around her shoulders. "You mean, like a family?" Michael nodded, his expression tender. "Yeah, like a family. What do you think?" For a moment, Lily was too overwhelmed to speak. Her mind raced with memories of the dark, lonely nights she had spent wishing for someone to care for her. Finally, she nodded, her lips curving into the faintest of smiles. Michael's eyes softened with relief and joy. "Okay," he said, his voice steady. "Then we'll make it happen." In the days that followed, the paperwork began. Michael spent long hours at the station, filling out forms and meeting with social workers, but he always made time to sit with Lily and check on her. The officers who had worked the case rallied around them, offering support and encouragement. One evening, Michael came to Lily with a small box wrapped in colorful paper. "I have something for you," he said, kneeling beside her. Lily carefully unwrapped the box, her hands trembling slightly. Inside was a small bracelet with a charm that spelled out a single word: hope. "I thought it would be a good name for you," Michael said softly, "because that's what you've brought to so many people. You've given us all hope." Lily's eyes filled with tears as she looked up at him. She slipped the bracelet onto her wrist and held it close, feeling its weight as something more than just a piece of jewelry. It was a promise, a new beginning, hope. It was hers now. The day finally came when Michael and Lily, now officially Hope, would visit the courthouse to finalize their new beginning as a family. Hope was nervous as they walked into the large building, her small hand gripping Michael's tightly. The echo of footsteps in the grand halls made her feel small, but Michael's warm smile reassured her. Inside the courtroom, familiar faces filled the benches. Officers who had worked the case, community volunteers who had helped the rescued children, and even the mayor sat quietly, all there to witness the moment. Hope's heart raced as she looked around, recognizing the kindness in their faces. The judge, a kind-looking woman with glasses perched on the tip of her nose, addressed Michael first, asking him questions about his intentions and his plans for their future. Hope listened carefully, her chest swelling with a mix of pride and relief as Michael spoke with unwavering conviction. When the judge turned to Hope, she leaned forward slightly, her voice gentle. "And how about you, young lady? Do you feel safe with Officer Michael? Do you want to live with him?" Hope looked up at Michael, her eyes locking onto his. In that moment, she felt all her fears melt away. "Yes," she said softly but firmly. "I want to stay with him. He's my dad now." A ripple of emotion swept through the courtroom. Michael blinked quickly, his eyes glistening as he reached out to squeeze her hand. The judge smiled warmly. "Well, it sounds like we have a perfect match." With a stroke of her pen, she signed the papers, making it official. "Congratulations, Officer Michael, and welcome to your new family, Hope." The room erupted into cheers. Hope looked around, her eyes wide as people clapped and smiled at her. Michael knelt down, pulling her into a tight hug. "We did it, kiddo," he whispered. "You're home now, forever." Outside the courthouse, the celebration continued. Balloons floated into the sky carrying messages of hope and love. Volunteers had set up tables with food, toys, and even a giant cake with "Welcome Home Hope" written across it in colorful icing. Hope stuck close to Michael as they walked through the crowd. People came up to congratulate them, patting Michael on the back and bending down to smile at her. A few of the children she had been rescued with ran up to hug her, their faces glowing with gratitude and joy. Later, as the sun began to set, Michael took Hope's hand and led her to a quieter spot in the park. They sat together on a bench, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink. It's beautiful, Hope said softly, her eyes wide as she took in the view. Michael smiled. It is, just like you. She leaned against his side, her small head resting on his arm. For the first time in as long as she could remember, she felt completely at peace. Thank you, she whispered. Michael kissed the top of her head, his voice steady and full of love. No, thank you, Hope. You've changed my life in ways I can't even explain. They stayed there until the stars began to twinkle in the night sky. Hand in hand, they walked back to their home, a warm light glowing in the windows. For Hope, it wasn't just a house. It was a place where she belonged, where she was loved, and where she could start her new life. As they stepped inside, Hope turned to Michael with a small smile. Can we watch the sunset again tomorrow? Michael chuckled softly, ruffling her hair. We can watch it every day if you want, kiddo. And for the first time, Hope truly believed in tomorrow. In the weeks that followed, Hope settled into her new life with Michael. His home, once quiet and unadorned, began to transform into a warm and lively place filled with laughter, soft blankets, and colorful toys. The living room, which had previously been neat and bare, now had a corner dedicated entirely to Hope's drawings and crafts. Michael hung her pictures on the walls with pride, declaring each one a masterpiece. Every day brought new routines and discoveries for Hope. Mornings were filled with the smell of pancakes and syrup as Michael tried his best to cook breakfast she loved, even if he occasionally burned the edges. Afternoons were spent at the park, where Hope laughed and ran freely, her steps light with a newfound sense of safety. One evening, as they sat on the couch together, Hope looked up at Michael with wide, thoughtful eyes. Do you think my friends are okay? She asked softly. Michael's expression softened and he pulled her close. They're more than okay, he assured her. We've found safe homes for all of them, just like we did for you. Hope nodded, though her small fingers fiddled with the hem of her sweater. I want them to feel happy too. They will, Michael said with certainty. And you know what? They're probably thinking the same thing about you. They want you to be happy too. Hope smiled at that thought, her heart feeling a little lighter. Michael made it a point to ensure that Hope knew she was part of a larger community. On weekends, they visited the police station where she had first met him, bringing cookies to share with the officers who had helped rescue her and the other children. Sarah, the kind officer who had stayed with her that first night, always greeted her with a big hug and asked about her favorite new activities. One Saturday, Michael surprised her with a trip to a local animal shelter. As they walked through the rows of wagging tails and curious eyes, Hope's face lit up. Are we getting a dog? She asked, her voice filled with excitement. Michael chuckled. Only if you're ready for the responsibility, he said. Hope nodded eagerly, her eyes scanning the room. She stopped in front of a small, scruffy dog with floppy ears and a wagging tail that seemed too big for its body. This one, she said with certainty. I want this one. The shelter worker explained that the dog, named Max, had been abandoned and needed a loving home. Hope looked up at Michael with a knowing expression. He needs us, she said simply. Michael couldn't argue with that. They took Max home that day, and he quickly became Hope's loyal companion, following her everywhere and curling up at the foot of her bed each night. As time passed, Hope began to flourish in ways that made Michael's heart swell with pride. She started school, making friends and learning with enthusiasm. She joined an art club and brought home paintings and crafts, each one more vibrant than the last. One afternoon, as they sat at the dining table working on a puzzle together, Hope looked up and said, Do you think I'll ever forget the bad place? Michael set down his puzzle piece and met her gaze. You might not forget it entirely, he said honestly. But it doesn't have to define you. You're so much more than what happened to you. Hope nodded, her expression thoughtful. I think I'm stronger now, she said after a moment. Michael smiled. You're the strongest person I know, he said. That night, as Hope drifted off to sleep with Max curled up beside her, Michael stood in the doorway, watching her with a mixture of awe and gratitude. She had come into his life like a storm, upending everything he thought he knew, and yet she had brought a light that filled his world in ways he hadn't thought possible. And for Hope, each day was a reminder that she was no longer alone. She had a home, a family, and a future filled with love and possibilities. Together, she and Michael had found something extraordinary, a second chance at happiness. As the seasons changed, so did Hope. With each passing day, her confidence grew, and the shy, withdrawn girl who had clung to her teddy bear now sparkled with a newfound vibrancy. Her laughter echoed through the house, filling the quiet spaces that had once seemed so empty. Michael often found himself pausing to marvel at her resilience and the light she brought into his life. One crisp fall morning, they decided to carve pumpkins together. Michael spread out newspapers on the kitchen floor, and Hope carefully drew a face on her pumpkin before handing it to him for carving. Max circled around them, wagging his tail and sniffing at the pumpkin guts. "You're pretty good at this," Michael said as he carefully followed her design with the knife. Hope giggled. "Maybe we should be pumpkin artists," she teased. Michael chuckled. "Is that a real job?" "It should be," she declared with a grin, scooping out another handful of pumpkin seeds. Moments like these became their new normal, small, ordinary joys that made life feel extraordinary. Michael took every opportunity to create memories with Hope, from spontaneous trips to the park to lazy movie nights on the couch. He wanted her to know that she was loved, not just in words, but in every action. One evening, as they walked Max through the neighborhood, Hope tugged on Michael's hand. "Do you think I could help other kids someday? Like the ones from the bad place?" Michael looked down at her, his heart swelling with pride. "I think you could do anything you set your mind to," he said. Hope's face lit up with determination. "Then I want to help. I want to make sure no one feels like I did." Her words stayed with Michael long after they returned home. He began looking for ways to support her budding passion, starting with a small fundraiser at her school to help local children in need. Hope took the lead, crafting colorful posters and speaking to her classmates with a confidence that amazed everyone who knew her story. The fundraiser was a success, raising enough money to provide warm clothing and school supplies for several children in the community. When the principal announced the results at a school assembly, Hope received a standing ovation. She beamed with pride, her eyes seeking out Michael in the crowd. He clapped the loudest, his chest tight with emotion. As the years went by, Hope's impact only grew. Inspired by her story, the community rallied around her, creating programs to support children who had experienced trauma. Hope became a symbol of resilience and kindness, her journey a testament to the power of love and second chances. On the anniversary of her adoption, Michael surprised her with a scrapbook he had been secretly working on. Inside were photos of their life together. Her first day of school, Max's first day at home, the pumpkin carving adventures, and countless other memories they had shared. "I wanted you to see how far you've come," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Hope flipped through the pages, her fingers tracing the edges of the photos. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at the smiling faces, the moments of joy and love that had defined her new life. "I wouldn't have any of this without you," she said softly, looking up at him. Michael knelt beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "And I wouldn't be who I am without you," he said. "You've given me more than I could ever give you, Hope." She wrapped her arms around him, holding on tightly. In that moment, neither of them needed words. They both knew that together they had found something rare and beautiful, a bond that could weather any storm and a love that would last a lifetime. As they sat together, flipping through the scrapbook and sharing memories, Hope realized something profound. She was no longer the girl from the bad place. She was a daughter, a friend, a beacon of hope for others. And with Michael by her side, she knew that anything was possible. Hope's life continued to blossom in ways neither she nor Michael could have imagined. She thrived at school, forming friendships that brought out her laughter and her creativity. Teachers often commented on her kindness, how she would go out of her way to include others or help someone who seemed left out. Her journey inspired those around her, becoming a quiet but powerful reminder that even the most difficult beginnings could lead to something beautiful. Michael encouraged her to explore her passions, supporting her love for art and her growing interest in helping others. One summer, she joined an art camp, where she learned to paint vivid landscapes and craft sculptures that told stories. One day, she came home with a painting of a small house surrounded by sunshine and flowers. "What's this?" Michael asked, admiring the piece. "It's our house," Hope said with a shy smile. "The way it feels." Michael's chest tightened, and he hung the painting in their living room right above the fireplace. It became a centerpiece of their home, a symbol of the warmth and love they shared. As the years went by, Hope grew more confident in sharing her story. She joined a youth group that focused on advocacy, where she connected with other kids who had faced tough beginnings. They worked together to raise awareness about issues like foster care and child safety, speaking at schools and community events. One evening, Hope stood on stage in front of an auditorium filled with parents, teachers, and children. Her hands trembled as she gripped the microphone, but when she looked out and saw Michael smiling in the front row, she took a deep breath and began. "When I was little, I didn't know what it meant to feel safe. I didn't know what it meant to have a home. But then I met someone who showed me that love can change everything. He gave me a chance to start over, and now I want to do the same for others." The audience erupted in applause as Hope stepped back from the microphone, her heart racing with pride and gratitude. Michael stood and clapped the loudest, his eyes glistening with tears. After the event, Michael hugged her tightly. "You're incredible," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You've already changed so many lives, Hope." "But you're the one who changed mine," she replied, her voice soft. That night, as they walked home under the stars, Hope felt a sense of purpose stronger than ever. She knew her story wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had supported her, believed in her, and shown her what love could do. Years later, Hope would go on to start her own foundation, dedicated to helping children find safe homes and loving families. The foundation's logo featured a small teddy bear, a tribute to the one she had held onto during her darkest days, and the one she had shared with the first child she helped. Michael remained by her side every step of the way, his pride in her growing with each accomplishment. Together, they continued to build a life filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. And though their journey had started with heartbreak and uncertainty, it had become a testament to the extraordinary power of compassion and connection. For Hope and Michael, the future was brighter than ever, and they knew they could face anything together. Hope's foundation quickly became a beacon for children in need and families looking to help. What started as a small community effort blossomed into a nationwide initiative, thanks to her passion and Michael's steadfast support. Together, they traveled to schools, community centers, and conferences, sharing their story and raising awareness about the importance of safe homes and loving connections. One sunny afternoon, as Hope prepared for a speech at a local event, she paused to look at Michael, who was busy organizing flyers at a table nearby. His hair had a little more gray than it used to, and laugh lines creased the corners of his eyes. But his smile was as warm and reassuring as ever. "You nervous?" Michael asked, glancing up at her with a knowing look. "Not really," Hope said with a small smile. I want them to feel it, you know? To understand that no matter how dark things seem, there's always a way to find light." Michael walked over, placing a hand on her shoulder. "They'll feel it. You have a way of touching people's hearts, Hope. Just be yourself." As she stepped onto the stage, Hope scanned the crowd, a mix of families, teachers, social workers, and children. Her heart swelled as she saw a little girl in the front row holding a teddy bear, her small hands gripping it tightly, much like Hope had done years ago. She took a deep breath and began. "When I was little, I thought the world was a place where people couldn't be trusted. I thought I'd always have to be scared, always be alone. But someone changed that for me. He showed me that the world can be kind, that people can be good, and that love can heal even the deepest wounds. And now it's my mission to share that same hope with others." The room was silent, every face fixed on her as she spoke. She told them about her journey, about the dark place she had escaped, the night she met Michael, and the home they built together. She spoke about the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the impact of one person choosing to care. When she finished, the applause was thunderous. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering, and Hope felt tears welling up in her eyes. She glanced over at Michael, who stood in the wings, his expression a mix of pride and love. After the event, people crowded around her, thanking her for sharing her story and telling her how it had inspired them. A young boy approached timidly, his eyes downcast. He looked up at her, clutching a small piece of paper. "I drew this for you," he said softly, holding out the paper. Hope unfolded it carefully and saw a drawing of her standing next to Michael, both of them smiling, with the words, "Thank you for giving us hope," written in bright colors. Her chest tightened, and she knelt down to the boy's level. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This means so much to me." As she hugged him gently, Michael watched from a distance, his heart full. He thought back to the night he had first met Hope on that cold, empty street. Back then, she had been a frightened, fragile little girl who barely spoke above a whisper. Now she was a force of nature, changing lives and spreading light wherever she went. Later that evening, as they sat on their front porch watching the sun set, Hope leaned her head against Michael's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked softly. "Every day," Michael replied. "It was the night my life changed forever." Hope smiled, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the charm bracelet on her wrist, the one Michael had given her years ago. "Me too," she said. "Sometimes I think about how different things could have been if you hadn't stopped to help me." Michael, now semi-retired from the police force, often joined Hope in her work. Together, they traveled to communities in need, meeting children and families whose lives had been changed by the programs they had built. One crisp autumn evening, as they returned home from an event, Hope paused on the front porch. The house was warm and inviting, with soft light spilling from the windows. Max, now older and a little slower, wagged his tail lazily as he lay by the door. "I was just thinking," Hope said, looking up at Michael with a smile. "This house, it's more than just a home. It's where everything started." Michael nodded, his expression tender. "And it's where everything grew." They stepped inside, the smell of fresh-baked cookies filling the air. Hope had invited Emily and a group of volunteers over for a small gathering, the house buzzing with laughter and conversation. As the night wound down, Hope and Michael sat together by the fireplace, flipping through an old scrapbook. They lingered on a photo of the two of them at her adoption hearing, Hope holding a stuffed bear and Michael beaming with pride. "You've come so far," Michael said, his voice soft. "We both have," Hope replied, leaning her head against his shoulder. And in that moment, surrounded by warmth, love, and the people they had welcomed into their lives, they both knew that their journey, though full of challenges, had been worth every step. Together, they had built something beautiful, something enduring, a legacy of love, hope, and second chances. Years passed, and Hope's foundation continued to expand, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. What had started as a small local initiative had grown into a national movement, with branches in cities across the country. Communities were coming together to support vulnerable children, offering them safety, love, and a chance at a better future. Hope herself became a renowned advocate for children's rights, often traveling to speak at conferences, lead workshops, and meet with policymakers. Despite her growing influence, she never forgot her roots. She remained humble, always crediting her success to the people who had helped her along the way, especially Michael. Michael, now retired, spent his days volunteering at the Foundation's headquarters. He was a steady presence, offering wisdom and encouragement to the staff and volunteers. He still called Hope Kiddo every now and then. even as she grew into a poised and confident leader. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside, Hope and Michael sat together in the living room, sipping hot cocoa. Max lay at their feet, his tail thumping lazily against the rug. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Hope asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Michael replied, his gaze distant for a moment. "That night on the street, it feels like a lifetime ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday." Hope smiled, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug. "I was so scared back then, but when I saw you, something told me you were different. I didn't know what it was, but I trusted you." Michael leaned forward, his voice filled with emotion. "And you saved me as much as I saved you, Hope. You gave my life a purpose I didn't even know I was missing." The room fell quiet, the warmth of their bond filling the space. A few days later, Hope received an invitation to a prestigious award ceremony in Washington, D.C. She had been nominated for a humanitarian award, recognizing her efforts to improve the lives of children across the nation. When she shared the news with Michael, his face lit up with pride. "You deserve this," he said, his voice steady. "I couldn't have done any of it without you," Hope replied, squeezing his hand. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The ceremony was a grand affair, held in a glittering ballroom filled with influential figures. As Hope walked to the stage to accept the award, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She thought of the little girl she once was, clutching a teddy bear and whispering, "Help me." That moment had set her on a path that led here to this moment. Her acceptance speech was heartfelt and personal. "This award isn't just for me," she said, her voice steady. "It's for every child who has ever felt forgotten. It's for the families who open their hearts and homes, and it's for the people who choose kindness, even when it's hard. People like my dad." She glanced at Michael, sitting proudly in the audience, his eyes misty with emotion. As the applause thundered, Hope realized that her journey wasn't just about what she had overcome. It was about what she had built. A life filled with love, purpose, and hope. After the ceremony, as they walked back to their hotel, Hope looked up at Michael. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" she asked quietly. Michael stopped, turning to face her. "She'd be more than proud," he said. "She'd be amazed by everything you've done. And so am I." Hope hugged him tightly, her heart full. In the years that followed, Hope continued her work, building programs that reached children worldwide. She trained others to carry on her mission, ensuring that the foundation would thrive for generations to come. Michael remained her greatest supporter, watching with pride as she changed countless lives. Together, they proved that love, no matter how small its beginnings, could grow into something extraordinary. And in the quiet moments, when they sat together on the porch or laughed over a shared meal, they both knew that their story, one of courage, compassion, and second chances, wasn't just theirs. It belonged to everyone they had touched, and to everyone who dared to believe in the power of hope. Years passed, and Hope's foundation continued to expand, touching lives in ways she could never have imagined. What had started as a small local initiative had grown into a national movement, with branches in cities across the country. Communities were coming together to support vulnerable children, offering them safety, love, and a chance at a better future. Hope herself became a renowned advocate for children's rights, often traveling to speak at conferences, lead workshops, and meet with policymakers. Despite her growing influence, she never forgot her roots. She remained humble, always crediting her success to the people who had helped her along the way, especially Michael. Michael, now retired, spent his days volunteering at the Foundation's headquarters. He was a steady presence, offering wisdom and encouragement to the staff and volunteers. He still called Hope Kiddo every now and then, even as she grew into a poised and confident leader. One winter evening, as snow gently fell outside, Hope and Michael sat together in the living room, sipping hot cocoa. Max lay at their feet, his tail thumping lazily against the rug. "Do you ever think about how it all started?" Hope asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Michael replied, his gaze distant for a moment. "That night on the street, It feels like a lifetime ago, but I remember it like it was yesterday." Hope smiled, her fingers tracing the edge of her mug. "I was so scared back then. But when I saw you, something told me you were different. I didn't know what it was, but I trusted you." Michael leaned forward, his voice filled with emotion. "And you saved me as much as I saved you, Hope. You gave my life a purpose I didn't even know I was missing." The room fell quiet, the warmth of their bond filling the space. A few days later, Hope received an invitation to a prestigious awards ceremony in Washington, D.C. She had been nominated for a humanitarian award recognizing her efforts to improve the lives of children across the nation. When she shared the news with Michael, his face lit up with pride. "You deserve this," he said, his voice steady. "I couldn't have done any of it without you," Hope replied, squeezing his hand. "You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." The ceremony was a grand affair, held in a glittering ballroom filled with influential figures. As Hope walked to the stage to accept the award, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She thought of the little girl she once was, clutching a teddy bear and whispering, "Help me." That moment had set her on a path that led here, to this moment. Her acceptance speech was heartfelt and personal. "This award isn't just for me," she said, her voice steady. "It's for every child who has ever felt forgotten. It's for the families who open their hearts and homes. And it's for the people who choose kindness, even when it's hard. People like my dad." She glanced at Michael, sitting proudly in the audience, his eyes misty with emotion. As the applause thundered, Hope realized that her journey wasn't just about what she had overcome. It was about what she had built. A life filled with love, purpose, and hope. After the ceremony, as they walked back to their hotel, Hope looked up at Michael. "Do you think Mom would be proud of me?" she asked quietly. Michael stopped, turning to face her. "She'd be more than proud," he said. "She'd be amazed by everything you've done, and so am I." Hope hugged him tightly, her heart full. In the years that followed, Hope continued her work, building programs that reached children worldwide. She trained others to carry on her mission, ensuring that the foundation would thrive for generations to come. Michael remained her greatest supporter, watching with pride as she changed countless lives. Together, they proved that love, no matter how small its beginnings, could grow into something extraordinary. And in the quiet moments when they sat together on the porch or laughed over a shared meal, they both knew that their story, one of courage, compassion, and second chances, wasn't just theirs. It belonged to everyone they had touched, and to everyone who dared to believe in the power of hope. As the years turned into decades, Hope's legacy continued to grow, reaching corners of the world she never thought possible. Her foundation evolved into a global movement, addressing not only the safety of children but also their education, emotional well-being, and future opportunities. What began as a mission to rescue and provide shelter had expanded into a vision for lasting change. Hope frequently traveled to visit the Foundation's programs in different countries. From classrooms in rural villages to bustling community centers in urban neighborhoods, she was constantly inspired by the resilience of the children she met. They reminded her of herself, scared, uncertain, yet filled with the potential for something greater. Michael, though older now, accompanied her on some of these trips when he could. On one memorable visit to a small town in South America, Hope watched as Michael sat surrounded by children, his laughter filling the air as he told them stories. Despite the language barrier, his warmth transcended words, and the children clung to him, their faces bright with joy. "You've always had a way of making people feel safe," Hope said later that evening as they sat by a fire. Michael smiled, his weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. "I think it's because I've had practice," he said, winking at her. "Starting with you." Hope leaned against his shoulder, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "I couldn't have asked for a better teacher." Back home, the Foundation's headquarters had become a bustling hub of activity. Hope worked closely with her team, many of whom were children who had been helped by the programs. Emily, the young woman Hope had mentored years ago, now served as the director of outreach, leading efforts to connect with even more families in need. One day, as Hope walked through the office, she stopped by a large bulletin board covered in photos and letters from children and families who had been helped. Among them was a picture of a little boy holding a teddy bear, the same bear Hope had given him years ago on the night he was rescued. Her eyes filled with tears as she touched the photo gently. She turned to Michael, who had come to visit that day, and said, "This is why we do it. This is what makes everything worth it." Michael nodded, his own eyes misty. "You've built something incredible, Hope. Something that will keep growing long after we're gone." As the years went on, Hope began to think more about the future. She wanted to ensure the foundation would remain strong and continue its mission for generations. She worked tirelessly to establish scholarships, training programs, and partnerships with other organizations. One afternoon, she called a meeting with her senior team. Sitting at the head of the table, she looked around at the people who had become like family to her. "I'm stepping back," she announced. There was a stunned silence, followed by murmurs of concern. "I'm not leaving entirely," she reassured them. "But it's time for me to pass the torch. This foundation is bigger than me now, and it belongs to all of us. You're the ones who will carry it forward." Emily, now a confident and accomplished leader, stood and spoke. "You're the heart of this foundation, Hope. But I promise, we'll honor everything you've built." Michael, who had been quietly observing, smiled proudly. Later that evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, he said, "That couldn't have been easy for you." "It wasn't," Hope admitted. "But I know it's the right thing to do. This was never about me. It was about making sure no child ever feels alone or forgotten." Michael placed a hand over hers. "You've done that, and so much more." As Hope shifted her focus to mentoring the next generation of leaders, she found herself with more time to reflect and reconnect. She spent afternoons painting in her sunny studio, evenings walking Max's successor, a lively pup named Bella, and weekends hosting gatherings for friends and family. The house she had once described as "our house, the way it feels" now felt even fuller, with laughter echoing through its rooms and love etched into its very walls. One day, years later, Hope and Michael sat side by side on their porch, now older but just as close as ever. Bella snoozed at their feet, and the scent of blooming flowers filled the air. "You know," Michael began, his voice soft, "when I first met you, I never imagined any of this. I just wanted to make sure you were safe.